So she's going to sail down to San Francisco?
Yep.
And how long do you think this voyage is going to take?
Probably about 2 years.
The Miniboat program from the Columbia River Maritime Museum is a robust education program that has now educated over 1,200 students in both the United States and Japan. We challenge the students to cooperatively design, build, launch, and then track a GPS-enabled autonomous sailboat with the hopes that it will cross the Pacific Ocean. Each class in the United States builds 2 boats. One is to be launched from the coast of North America, and the other I personally take over to Japan and hand over to their partner class.
This program is teaching kids way more than just building a boat. This is STEAM, this is science, technology, engineering, art, and math, all wrapped into one with an international relations element. They're learning so many different skills, and they're learning what that value can bring back to their own life.
We learned teamwork and perseverance.
It was fun to be kind of hands-on.
There are so many different learners in a classroom that we can engage all 30 students with this one tool. But what I think makes a mini boat extra special is it's all hands-on, and the students get to make every decision themselves. The quartermaster department studies ocean currents and weather patterns to look for the most perfect spot to launch their mini boat. The KEEL department has one of the most important jobs. If their mini boat flips upside down and that keel is not engineered perfectly, their mini boat won't right up and continue on its voyage. The sail department and the deck department have complete creative control of what that mini boat's gonna look like.
If it's facing this way and that sail is pointing that way, it won't get sun at all.
Kids are strengthening skills. They also are learning about new skills and really opening their minds.
Really, it's the value we get back. When these young people who as 5th graders learned how to do international relations, they learned how to work on teams and projects, they built their confidence, and a few years later they're going to be in high school, challenging themselves more than they might have otherwise, and then they're going to enter the workforce. We're trying to invest in the future.
Any problems we see with this?
No, don't fold it, because then it might.
As a mini boat program, we're actually preparing students for future careers. We're letting them try out all these different jobs and see where they fit best.
It's important for Pacific Power to be involved in the mini boat program because of the enriching value that this program brings to students, to stimulate curiosity, to kind of think outside the classroom box. These are all the same types of skills that our employees need to have to be successful in this business.
It's our responsibility and opportunity to invest in changing the way that we educate, like we see in this mini boats program, where kids just get engaged. And when kids are engaged, they succeed. They want to come to school, they want to accomplish great things, and these programs show them that they can.
To hear parents and teachers say that they've seen their students transform and the year that the mini boat was in their classroom, I think is the greatest compliment to the program.
I hope this program does help students to start thinking about their future and what kind of career they might want. And for some of these students, if they choose to stay close to home, I think it's wonderful for them to learn about some of the things they could do right here.
Hopefully when they see these boats and they see the videos of them sailing away, they think, I built that. I built a boat that sailed across the Pacific Ocean when I was in 5th grade. The physical boats themselves are small, but the voyages they go on are mighty. The students who build them are small, but the things they accomplish when they come together are mighty.
Welcome back, friends, to our 3rd and final live stream. Thank you so much for joining today, and hopefully for our previous 2 events. We've learned so much and had so much fun. For those of you new today, I'll take just a minute to introduce myself. I'm Elisa Dunlap. I'm Pacific Power's Regional Business Manager for the North Coast of Oregon. That means I get to keep our local communities informed about what Pacific Power is doing, programs we have to offer, and ways we get to work together. This school year, I've had the pleasure of working with our friends at the Columbia River Maritime Museum on its incredible mini boat program. For those of you new to today's live stream, it's a class project that involves students designing and building 5-foot sailboats that will sail across the Pacific. Each student chooses a job depending on their particular interests. They might engineer the keel, they might paint the sail, they might choose a launch location, write posts for social media, or correspond with their sister school in Japan. Working collaboratively with a sister school in Japan is just another fascinating part of this program. In fact, we'll be hearing a little bit more about the students from Japan and their boats during today's program. There's no doubt these students will have built memories to last a lifetime. But the really cool thing is that they are learning by doing, using their curiosity and interest to develop new skills that might one day help them in a future career. The whole program is designed to emphasize the skills you need for STEAM fields, that's science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math. If you've been with us over the past couple of weeks, you're already and ready to dive in. But if you weren't with us the last 2 Fridays, here's a quick recap. During our first live stream, we got to watch a relaunch of one of the boats part of this year's fleet. After the boat washed ashore after its initial launch to sea, it had washed ashore and the class wanted to give it a relaunch. So we gave it a second chance and relaunched it on the Columbia River and are now following its voyage from the Port of Vancouver to the Columbia River Maritime Museum in Astoria, where it will be relaunched to sea. We're going to have an update on it later. As we talked about, that second chance is one of the things that we really love most about this program. It demonstrates exactly what the STEAM process is all about. Trying, failing, learning from what went wrong, and trying again. Practicing this persistence can be difficult, but it will help these kids succeed no matter what they decide to do in the future. Last week, we learned about how wind and currents affect our mini boat's voyage. We had special guests from the National Weather Service to talk about wind and weather in the Northwest, and a special guest from Educational Passages. This is the company who helps us track our mini boats using GPS and can provide real-time ocean conditions, telling us if our boats are experiencing nice calm seas or if they're sailing through a fierce storm. I know you're eager to find out what's in store for today, so let's figure out what we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about our largest river, the largest river in our region, the Columbia River, how it contributes to our economy, and of course, we're going to get an update on our mini boats. So let's meet our guests for today. First, we're going to hear from our friend Nate Sandel, the Education Director for the Columbia River Maritime Museum. He's got the scoop on where our mini boat is located, and he'll share with us some information and some really cool pictures of large ships that travel along our river. He'll also share what type of cargo they may carry and some fascinating facts about how that cargo is unloaded. Hi, Nate.
Hey, Nate Sandel here from our Navigation and Mapping Gallery at the Columbia River Maritime Museum. Really excited for our final live stream today.
Wonderful. We are going to hear more from you later. Next, I'd like to introduce you to a special guest, Captain Elroy Olson from the Columbia River Pilots, who will be talking about how a working river, well, how it works. He'll share details with us about how ships navigate the Columbia on their river journey. He's joined today by Ruby, a 7th grader from Y East Middle School, who will also be asking Captain Olson about his job. Hi, Captain Olson.
Good morning, Captain Olson here from the Columbia River Pods. So excited to help out with this program.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Hi, Ruby. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Wonderful. Well, we can't wait to hear from you later. We'll also be talking with one of my colleagues from Pacific Power, John Connolly, who is manager of our field engineering team. He is joining us with Caitlin, a 7th grader from Warrenton Grade School, to talk about the lighting project that they worked on together. This year, the students from Warrenton Grade School wanted to add some lighting features to their boat so it could be better spotted at night. John and a fellow engineer from Pacific Power worked with the kids to help them solve a problem to add this feature to their mini boat. At Pacific Power, we really love to mentor kids and get them excited about the work that we do every day. He and Caitlin can't wait to share with you about the cool lights on this boat that run via solar. Hi, John.
Hey, everyone. Glad to be here today.
Hi, Caitlin.
Hi. Oh gosh, that fell.
No problem, Caitlin. We'll hear more from you in a little bit. And lastly, we will have a report from the river with our friend, Mr. Boken, 7th grade teacher at Y East Middle School. He has been busy tracking the boat, helping with rescues and relaunches all week. Hi, Mr. Boken. We can't wait to hear your news.
Hello, I'm here with Jerry Ostermiller, former Legislative Captain Jerry Ostermiller, former Executive Director of the Columbia River Maritime Museum, and we will have a report here for you shortly.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. We can't wait to hear all about the rescues you've partaken in this week. We've got a full program ahead of us, so let's set sail. Nate, back over to you.
Hey everybody, back here from our navigation and mapping gallery at the Columbia River Maritime Museum. And let's start out with our review again. What is a mini boat? Well, number one, I can tell you they're awesome, but they are 5-foot fiberglass boats built by students right here in the Pacific Northwest. Each boat, again, is about 5 feet tall, 5 feet long, about the size of a 5th grader. They weigh about 40 pounds, depending on the cargo that the students decide to put inside. And what I think is the coolest part, they're equipped with a GPS tracker, so the students always know where their mini boats are. So the students spent the first 8 weeks of 2019 assembling 2 different mini boats. One was launched from the coast of North America, and of course the other one we took to Japan. These students broke themselves into independent teams. No adult ever told them what to do. They made every single decision themselves. So again, one boat is launched from the coast of Japan with our partner city, Hachinohe, and the other boat is launched anywhere the students want from North America. And just like the Liberty, she was launched right here at the mouth of the Columbia, sailed about 300 miles and crashed right back here in Oregon, which started our Mighty Miniboat Float. But the inspiration for the mini boat program starts back to an awful tragedy that happened in 2011. There was an earthquake followed by a tsunami that ravaged the east coast of Japan. And a lot of debris was washed out into the ocean. And a peculiar thing started happening. About 2 years later, a lot of this debris started washing up on the shores of Oregon and Washington, like this boat you're looking at here called the Sideshow Maru, which was an abalone fishing boat. The Sideshow Maru now lives at the Great Hall at the Columbia River Maritime Museum, where you can come and see her yourself. So our entire program was created to create friends between students in the United States and Japan, and also recreate that float across the Pacific Ocean with a little bit of help from the wind. So that is what a mini boat is. And if you would like to have a mini boat in your classroom, make sure to join our Facebook page and follow along for applications for teachers for next year will be coming out very shortly. So let's talk about our Mighty Miniboat Float. It all started with a crazy idea where Mr. Boken said, I need to get you my mini boat to relaunch. How about I just swim out in the river and push it to you? Well, that started this whole idea where the mini boat has floated and made many different stops along the way, being rescued by a lot of different people, what we'll talk about in a few minutes. And let me tell you, last night, I thought for sure the mini boat was going to make it to Astoria. We launched it from Oak Point a couple of days ago, and overnight, she floated over 30 miles. It was really, really amazing. And I thought, oh, for sure, she'll be floating right by the museum last night. Right where you see this dotted line start that turns gray is where she was last night. We were hoping coming to Astoria, but unfortunately, the tide took a turn, literally, and pushed the mini boat back up river. So let's take a look and see her journey. Right now, she's sitting right there on what's called Horseshoe Island. And we'll check in with Mr. Boken in a few minutes because him and my mentor, Jerry Ostermiller, are out there trying to track her down. But as you can see, it's very tidal. And right now the tide is going out, which means there's a lot more land kind of appearing. And we want everybody to stay safe. So let's review the voyage really quickly, starting where we were last Friday. The mini boat was on Martin Island. And during our live stream, Captain Olson's son, Captain Luke, took her back out with Mr. Boken and launched her along her way. And that same night, she washed up on Tide Creek on the Oregon side of the Columbia River. So Mr. Boken and Luke Olson went back out there, rounded her up, pushed her back out into the river, where she sailed about 15 miles or so to Cottonwood Island. And this picture right here was sent to me by Captain Elroy Olson, who was our special guest today, who actually took this picture while piloting a ship right by where the mini boat was. We really appreciate all the photos that Captain Olson has been sending us along the way. So the mini boat Liberty sat at Cottonwood Island for 2 days. And then on June 9th at 6:30 in the morning, Mr. Boken and I boarded the Triumph No. 3 in Kalama, Washington. And the Anchorage Lost Service was really, really great. They delivered a couple of people to a ship to help clean out the holds. Maybe we'll talk about that job in a little bit. But it was a mini boat first. We saw the mini boat, but the Triumph 3 could not get to the island. So the captain dropped his paddleboard into the Columbia River, threw himself over the side, and paddled to the Liberty. And then he dragged them all about 200 yards upstream. And I'm thinking, what is he doing there? But he was going to work smarter, not harder, and use a current to actually help propel him back to the boat. We drug the Liberty back on, went about a half a mile or so downriver, away from where the dredge was working. We did not want the mini boat being sucked up in a dredge, and relaunched her. And again, she floated for over 30 miles until she got to Oak Point, Washington, where, again, Mr. Boken, our mini boat hero, and his daughter got out Mr. Boken's Viking mini boat, push you back out into the river tool, and got her successfully back on her way, where she floated all night long until she arrived on Bradwood Island right here in Oregon. About 7 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call from a fisherman and said, "Hey, we found your mini boat. What should we do?" So they relaunched it when they were done fishing. But unfortunately, that mini boat just floated across the channel onto a different island. And again, my favorite thing about the mini boat program is we have all of these people from all these different jobs coming together. Well, Mr. Boken was talking with the Wahkiakum County Sheriffs, and one of those deputies, she got in her kayak, paddled out in the morning yesterday, and pushed the Liberty back out and delivered us what I think is the most beautiful photo of the Liberty ever. I mean, we're talking poster quality, Mr. Boken. So that was sort of the Liberty's journey so far. And right now, let's head back out to Mr. Boken and see how he's doing and what's happening out there in the river. Hey, Mr. Boken, are you out? And maybe Mr. Boken is having some technical difficulties as well. There is a little bit of a cell phone issue. Oh, perfect, Mr. Boken. What's happening out there?
So we are going to try to land. I'm going to flip my camera around here. We're going to try to land right over there and walk about 100 yards down shore through the grass and the reeds. We still have the sheriff's department here, just in case somebody falls in or if we get stuck. And then we will probably carry her back to the boat. So,
well, Mr. Boken, who's the captain of the boat you're on right now?
This is Captain Jerry Ostermiller. He is the former chief executive or executive director of the Columbia River Maritime Museum. So Captain Ostermiller, I think, has mentioned we are on the ground right now. So we're doing a lot to try to figure out just how to get out there.
Well, I think you're breaking up a little bit out there, but Mr. Boken, don't worry. Mr. Ostermiller is the person who gave me my first job out of college. So if you guys run aground, I'll be out there in my rowboat, and I can maybe row you and tow you off of that sandbar. We'll check in back in a little bit, Mr. Boken, and stay safe out there. And I'm glad that the sheriff are out there taking good care of you. All right, well, let's talk a little bit now about my favorite subject in the entire world, and that is ships. Now, let me tell you, 16 years ago, the reason I moved to Astoria is when I came here and I came around the bend, I saw lines of these beautiful freighters, and I instantly fell in love. There's something romantic about seeing these ships that are traveling all over the world and have crews from many different nations sailing right by our houses. It's a real global connection, and it just really gets your mind thinking about all the products traveling all over the world. Now, the one ship that most of us know about are called container ships. And this is what brings our toys and our electronics, even frozen French fries and tires travel on these container ships. And for a long time, we didn't see them calling the Columbia River. But just in about the last year, on a Sunday, if you look out in that river, you can usually see one of these ships traveling up and down. So the most common type of ship that we will see here in the Columbia River is what's called a bulk carrier. And just like their name, they carry things in bulk. They have these huge hatches that you can fill up with any kind of cargo. You can put potash, wheat, barley. They can carry just about anything. Now, there's two major different types that we will see here on the Columbia River. But one thing is really important. Is a ship full or is a ship empty? And there's one really easy way. Typically, they're coming into the Columbia River empty, which looks like this, and they're leaving full of cargo. And so as the cargo is being loaded on these ships, they sink down into the water. So if you see any of that second tone, you know that ship is unloaded. So these bulk carriers here are called Panamax. And they're the largest bulk carriers we typically see in the river, about 700 or so feet long. And the reason they're called Panamax is they have the widest beam, and on a ship, the beam is the width to fit through the Panama Canal. We also have ships that are called Handymax, and those ships are the bulk carriers that have the beam that is maximum to go through the Panama Canal as well, but they're typically a little bit shorter. They can also be outfitted as log carriers, where they put the logs in the holds and also stack them on top. Again, I would say about 60–70% of the ships you're going to see in the Columbia River are bulk carriers, even like this little handy-sized bulk carrier, and that is carrying windmill blades. And I know Pacific Power just recently brought in a very large shipment of these windmill turbine towers and blades heading out to wind farms that help give us really good, clean energy. My personal favorite kind of ship in the whole world is what's called a ro-ro. And ro-ro stands for roll on, roll off. And I have a really cool video we'll show you about how these work. They have a giant ramp off the back, and you just roll on and roll off your cargo. Why it's called a ro-ro ship. You will also see ships sometimes that have all these pipes all over the top. And those are chemical tankers, and they're typically going to the paper mills and helping all of that industry get what they need. Now, this ship is really unusual. It's called the Pacific Tracker, although my daughter always yells, "Hey, Dad, the golf ball ship's going by." And that's because it has a big radar on the back covered up that makes it look like a golf ball. And the U.S. Navy uses this to help track missiles in the air during their different exercises they do out in the ocean. Now, we don't have oil tankers that come into the Columbia River carrying crude oil. We will see them once in a while going into Swan Island, our local shipyard. But all of our fuel either comes to Oregon by a pipeline or by one of these, which is called an articulated tug and barge. They are double-hull vessels, usually carrying refined petroleum from California up to the Columbia River. And what's really great about these is that if you're out in the ocean in big waves and the barge goes one way, the tug can actually pivot, so you're not actually going to break it. It's a really, really ingenious, whoever engineered this barge and tug really did their job right. And finally, yes, you will see sometimes yachts coming up and down the Columbia River. Even Ringo Starr, the drummer from the Beatles, had his yacht in the Columbia River a couple of years ago. He even had a helicopter that landed on top. But there's a really great shipyard in Vancouver that builds yachts for famous people and rich people all over the world. So that's our River Traffic 101. Hopefully you learned a few things about some ships. We'll come back in a little bit and I'll tell you how they actually load and unload their cargo. But we actually have an expert ship captain with us today, and that is Captain Elroy Olson from the Columbia River Pilots. How you doing, Captain Olson?
Good morning, Nate. I'm doing great.
Well, we are so glad to have you here today. And we also have our student from Y East Middle School, Ruby, with us. Hey, Ruby.
Hi, Nate.
So, Ruby, before we start talking to Captain Olson and drill him with a whole bunch of questions, because I, again, am a ship nerd, Ruby, and I got a lot of questions I'm sure you do for Captain Olson. Ruby, could you tell us, what did you do for the mini boat program in your class?
Well, since Mr. Boken is a middle school teacher, he has 3 period classes, and my class was period 5, the last class of the day. Since Nate only brought in 2 boats for our school, Nate came up with the idea to allow us to make instead a drifter.
Great. And Ruby, what is a drifter?
Well, physically, it looks like a giant pole with a buoy on top and with 4 sails sticking out of it.
Perfect. And so, Ruby, with your class, we wanted to launch a mini boat and a drifter at the same location to see how does a drifter drift with a current compared to a mini boat that's using mostly wind. And Ruby, when we dropped your drifter in Japan at the same place as your mini boat, what happened to the drifter and what happened to the mini boat?
Well, the mini boat is actually crossed midway point, I think a few months ago, and is getting pretty far. But the drifter went up towards the top of Asia and one day stopped transmitting, and as Mr. Boca put it, it got eaten by a whale.
That's right. But we learned a lot of information in those couple of days that mini boat went this way and the drifter went this way. So that was a lot of great information that we learned. So Ruby, we actually relaunched your drifter for the 3rd time here last week, and I actually have an update. About a half hour before we came to air, I got a phone call from somebody who found your drifter on the beach this morning. What do you think of that?
Really?
So they had them drop it off at the police station. I'm going to drive up later on today up to Tacoma and go ahead and pick it up. It did travel about halfway up the coast of Washington. So Ruby, we have lots of questions for Captain Olson, and I'm sure our audience does too. So audience, if you have questions for any of our students or our expert, Captain Olson, please type them in the chat bar and we'll get those answered for you. Captain Olson, let me first ask you, after thanking you so much for coming here, how did you become a river pilot?
Good question, Nate. When I was 14 years old, I was working on a commercial fishing boat in the lower Columbia River, and it was rough and the boat was rocking around and the ship went by, and I told the guy I was working with, I want to work on one of those boats that don't rock around. And that led to my journey.
Great. And I guess I should have buried the lead. What is a river pilot?
River pilot is a pilot that's licensed by the federal government, the United States Coast Guard, and the state of Oregon to navigate these vessels that come from foreign ports and domestic vessels that require pilots up and down the Columbia River to help protect the public safety and the environment.
Excellent. Well, we are so glad that we have so many talented pilots keeping our ships safe and our shores safe as well. Ruby, do you have some questions for Captain Olson?
I do. Captain Olson, I was wondering, how does piloting a tugboat help you pilot the larger freighters in the Columbia River?
Good morning, Ruby. That's an excellent question. Most of the pilots work on tugboats that go east of Vancouver and Portland, go up in the Snake River, pushing barge tows that are up in the 650-foot length, 84 feet wide, and they have a draft of about 14 feet, and they do this with 3,000 horsepower tugs. So the weight to size ratio is very good experience. You get to see what currents do to you, get to see what winds do to you, and the hands-on steering gives you a great experience to know what a ship's going to do while you're piloting it.
Hey, that's great. Captain Olson, Nate here again. So can anybody be a pilot? Like, what sort of special training? Is it difficult to become a pilot? Can you tell us about that process?
Sure. Yes, anybody that can be a pilot, they just have to go through, there's some steps to go through. The first step is that you have to be the master of a tugboat for 720 days. You can then take a Coast Guard examination as long as you have 15 trips, round trips over the route that you want to do your pilotage. Once you acquire pilotage from the Coast Guard, then you can apply for a Oregon State pilot license, which requires that same amount plus 720 days.
Wow. That sounds like a lot of work, but, very important.
Sure. It takes...
Ruby, do you have sorry. Go ahead, Captain Olson.
Sure, it takes on the average to get... So you start out as a deckhand on a tugboat. You can come from a maritime school, but you still have to go work on the tugboats. You start out on a tugboat in approximately 3 to 4 years. You can move up, obtain a Coast Guard license around a tugboat. And then it takes about 3.5 years to obtain enough hours or enough days to get the time so that you can set for the examinations. Now, the way they count that time is a 12-hour day is a day and a half. So the Coast Guard counts an 8-hour day as 1 day. So if you work a 12-hour day, you get credit for a day and a half for that.
Wow. Hey, Ruby, do you have another question for Captain Olson?
I do. Captain Olson, since we have a mini boat that's going from Vancouver to Oregon and Portland just across the way, how long does it take for a ship that you can put yourself to get from Portland, Oregon to Astoria, Oregon?
That's another good question, Ruby. It varies on how deep the ship is in draft, what size the ship is, and what the tide and current is. But it's about an average of 6 hours from Kelly Point, which is where the Willamette and Columbia River confluence. And inbound, it takes about a half hour to 45 minutes longer because we generally have more current against us than we do flood tide. Just because we have river flow helping the outgoing tide, we don't have that same thing on the flood tides.
Wow. So that's a long time, Captain Olson. What happens if you get hungry when you're on the ship?
Oh, that's the good part of our job, Nate. We get to test cuisine from all over the world. My favorite thing to do on a ship.
Great. Well, hey, Ruby, do you have 1 or 2 more questions for Captain Olson?
I do. I hope it's okay if I ask you quite a few. So while you're piloting a boat, what's a stressful event that can occur?
Most of the stressful events occur that if you start piloting a vessel and the weather's clear and it gets foggy, then you have to stick your head inside the radar and you're not looking out anywhere and you're watching just the radar. And every once in a while, peek up. We have laptops that our program's called TV32. That's a navigation program similar to some of the charts that you see, Nate, that locates your little mini boats, but it gives us our position, speed, and heading. It tells you whether you're turning, not turning. So those can aid us. The other stressful time is in the summertime when there's a lot of people using the beaches for swimming and family events. And we have to make sure that we go by those places very slow so that the surge of the ship or the wake of the ship doesn't hurt anyone.
You said that people.
So I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll give the last question or two to Ruby. Captain Olson, what's the largest ship to ever call a port on the Columbia River?
Oh, it was called the Stuyvesant, and I don't know if everybody can see the picture right here off my right-hand shoulder there. That's the Stuyvesant going through the old railroad bridge. It was 170. I might be a couple feet off on this, but I think it was 175 feet wide and 1,100 and some feet long, almost 4 football fields long and wider than a football field.
Wow, that's incredible. All right, Ruby, I'm going to let you ask one or two more questions to Captain Olson.
All right. Captain Olson, why do you love piloting?
I love piloting because every day, every job that we have is different. It's not the same old grind. You get to meet people from all over the world, which is, is just a tremendous honor. And we're somewhat like, unofficially, we're ambassadors for the United States because some of these foreign people that come in on these ships, the first American they ever set their eyes on is a pilot. And the example that we set is what those foreigners portray as what Americans are. And I just lavish the idea of setting a good example for the United States.
You also mentioned that people on the side of the river can be difficult to, pilot a boat around. What if there are people in the river in other boats?
Yeah, so most people that just come out on small boats, they see the river as from bank to bank, and they don't really understand that the ship channel is only 600 feet wide, and with a lot of these drafts, we stay inside that. So when they're going back and forth across the channel, we have a proper lookout on the bow all the time. We have to make sure that these boats don't get ran over by the ship. And we have, if you ever hear 5 blasts on the whistle, that's a danger whistle saying, letting you know that you are in my way and there's not much I can do about it. So if you could please move out of my way, it'd be safer for all of us. So we got to keep a close eye out for that all the time.
That's great. Ruby, thanks for those really great questions. I'm not surprised. You always had great questions when I was in your classroom. Usually you'd be getting to me before I even went into the door. So Ruby, thanks for all that great enthusiasm. And Captain Elroy Olson, I'm sure we'll have more questions for you. But am I right that you have safely transited over 3,000 ships up and down the Columbia River in your career?
Yeah, I think it's about 3,300 trips without incident.
Wow, that is really amazing. Thank you both so much, and we'll check in back with you in a little bit. But right now, let's go back to our lesson and figure out how these ships are actually loaded and unloaded in the cargo that they carry. And maybe we can talk in a little bit to Captain Olson about what the main countries that these ships are coming from and going to with the cargo. So the number one cargo on the Columbia River is wheat. And actually more wheat is shipped out of the Columbia River than all of the other ports combined in the United States. And basically they come in from trains from the Midwest, and the trains dump them onto these big conveyor belts. And these conveyor belts take them to these hoses and just fill up the holes on the ship. You have to engineer the way and using science to figure out how to load those ships so that the ship is equally balanced at the dock. You don't want to put too much cargo in the bow and the ship will not ride right and be unsafe. So another major cargo is our logs. And most of these logs are going to Japan and China and even India. And at Astoria, we used to load logs here. They're some of the coolest cargo I like to see traveling up and down the river. But again, the Ro-Ro is my favorite. Think of it as a floating parking garage. And like I said, Ro-Ro, roll on, roll off, the cargo drives in and off. And what's really cool about these ships is that the levels of those parking garages are on hydraulics, and they can raise and lower them depending on the size of the cargo they're using. So here's a picture I took from inside one of these vessels, and you can see even the ramps between the levels are being used. You don't want to have any wasted space on these ships for the cargo. So that's somebody's job, is to actually drive those cars on and off that ship. So I hope you learned a little bit about shipping on the river and the cargo they carry. If you want to learn more, come check out the Columbia River Maritime Museum in a couple of weeks when we're open. We have lots of great information about all of the trade. So the final thing I wanted to talk about today before we get to our engineer is our Japanese student connections. Again, each class in the United States is partnered with a different class in Japan. And when we come, the students like to put on little performances, songs and dance to share with their partners here in the United States. So I thought it'd be a great time to show you some of their performances. Well, I hope you really enjoyed those performances from some of our partner schools. And you may have noticed that one of our next special guests might have the same t-shirt as one of those very students. Hey, Caitlin from Warrenton Grade School, are you there?
I am.
Great, love that shirt there, just with your partner school was Okuki. And you are also here with John, who is an engineer from Pacific Power. Hi, John.
Oh, hey everyone. Sorry, I think I was muted.
Hey, no problem. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining us today. So, Caitlin, before we start talking to John, I want to just mention something really, really exciting that happened this week. Could you tell us what exciting thing happened with your boat that was launched from Japan, the Kuru Go?
They found it. It was missing. We found it.
Yeah, so just a quick little recap. Their boat was launched from Japan on Thanksgiving Day. It was screaming, it was hundreds of miles ahead of the other boats that we launched at the same time. And then at the end of January, she disappeared. And what had happened is during a really, really big storm, she probably got flipped upside down. And of course, when a mini boat is upside down, you can't get a GPS reading. And then all of a sudden, 4 months later, another storm flipped her right side up. And Caitlin, your class did such a great job sealing up that hatch. No water got in, and that GPS just kept on pinging. So congratulations on that great feat. We thought it was lost forever, Caitlin. So Caitlin, pictured behind you is your mini boat Goonies that you built. Your class had a really interesting idea, the first idea that a class has ever brought to me like this. I can see them glowing behind you. Could you tell me what your class wanted to do?
Yeah, we decided to put lights on our mini boat.
Very cool. Now, you wanted to put lights on the boat. The program sponsor was Pacific Power. It was a natural fit. So we called them up and they brought us a really great mentor, John. Hey, John, how's it going?
Hey, good.
So John, what went through your mind when Pacific Power came and said, hey, we want you to go in and help a class of 7th graders install lights on their boat?
I thought it was awesome because we don't really, there's not too many opportunities at our company to get involved with, projects like this where we get to come in and mentor students on, the different technologies in the industry and everything. So I thought it was awesome.
That's great. Now, Caitlin, why did you want lights on your boat, and how did you want to power those lights?
We wanted lights on our boat to be not because anybody else hasn't, but for us to be a little different and it's new. And how we powered it was
absolutely
putting a solar panel
right
with a battery.
That's great, Caitlin. Now, a big theme of the mini boat program is we fail, we try again, we fail, we try again. Originally, you put 4 lights on your boat, but I only see 2 lights glowing right now. What happened?
We disconnected the ones on the hole.
And why was that?
Because the battery could not hold it or power it enough.
Excellent. And Captain Elroy, I just heard a ship blow its horn 5 times, so I'm assuming somebody's in their way. John, back to you. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience in the class, and what did the students want to do, and how did you make that happen?
Yeah, so, well, I should probably go back. I don't think I introduced myself or anything. So, so John Conley, Field Engineering Manager at Pacific Power. Some people may wonder, kind of how I got into this field, or how do you get into electrical engineering? Well, for me, it actually all started, a lot of people on this call are probably familiar with, video games. Well, I was really into playing Xbox when I was, in high school and everything. So I thought, okay, how could I was interested in, how, like an Xbox is put together. So I, was thinking, okay, how could I, get into a field or a job where I could, maybe design something like that. And so I landed into electrical engineering. And as I was going through school, what makes up an Xbox is actually really complicated. You realize it takes a team of people to make something like that. So, so I decided, that I got more focused into the power side of things, and that's how kind of where I got to where I'm at today. And what were you asking before, Nate, about what was your question again?
I don't know, I forgot because I got all jazzed up when you said video game, and it reminded me, Caitlin, do you remember when John was in your class and he said, oh, well, I got into this because of video games, and like half of your class's eyes went like this. It was pretty great. So Caitlin, if you want to ask John a couple more questions here, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you to finish off this interview with John, since the two of you did work very closely on this project.
Yeah, I have a question. did you have fun in our class?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun, and it was kind of a scary experience as well, because there was all these brains and just my brain, and I had to present this information, and you guys can catch all the mistakes when I'm presenting information like that. So it was a lot of fun though.
Great, Caitlin, we got time for one more question.
Yeah. Can you help explain the power system and how it works?
Yeah, so when it comes to the mini boat, we wanted to install a solar panel on it, and lights. So lights take energy, and so we had basically the battery, the lights, the solar panel, and a controller. Normally the lights would be powered by just the battery, but the battery only stores so much energy. So we had the solar panel on there which actually creates energy from the sun. So what would happen is during the day, we had also that controller. It would basically power the lights and the battery from the solar panel during the day, and then at night when there's no sunlight, it would switch to the battery to power the lights. So so basically, like, the solar panel was allowing the battery to charge so it wouldn't run out of energy during its voyage.
Well, John, thank you so much. Caitlin, thank you so much. We were so lucky as teachers and students to have these great experts like Captain Olson, who visited Columbia City many times, and also John coming into your school, helping you create those lights. So experts, students, thank you so much. I think we're going to head back out to the Columbia River with Mr. Joe Boken and see what's happening out there. Mr. Boken. All right, well, you know how technical things get out on the water. Maybe we'll check back with him in a few minutes. But Lisa, are you there? And do we have, I've seen a lot of questions coming in for our experts today.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some great questions here from our audience participation. So Captain Olson, this one's actually going to go over to you. We've got a question that is, what is the biggest challenge you face on the Columbia River besides the sandbars?
Biggest challenge is a draft. Our channel is maintained to 43 feet, and we sail ships at 43 feet. So you can imagine the underkeel clearance is not very much. That's one of our biggest challenges, is the draft.
Great, thanks. All these things that you wouldn't think about when a boat is just floating down the river, just nice and gently.
And Lisa, can I interrupt really quick?
Oh, absolutely.
Captain Olson, could you tell us what draft is on a ship?
So our maximum draft is 43 feet. And usually those Panamax ships that you talked about that are Panamax beam and 700 and some feet long, and also the Handymax ships can get drafts. But the average draft throughout all the traffic over a year is 35 feet.
And the draft is exactly, what is the draft on a ship? Is it how far it goes underwater?
Absolutely. Those are the load lines for, they have different load lines for summer and winter because of the saltwater content in the ocean warming up and cooling off. So that's the amount of ship that's below the water level.
Great. And sorry, Elisa, to interrupt. I just want to know, what is draft on a ship?
No problem at all. We actually have another question similar to the different experiences, I think, between a pilot that might be piloting the Columbia River Bar, which is the area that goes out to sea, and a river pilot. So can you explain what the difference is between a bar pilot and a river pilot, Mr. Olson? Captain Olson.
I'll do my best job. I don't ever like to speak about other people's jobs, but I am pretty much experienced on the bar. The Columbia River Bar is one of the most dangerous bars in the whole world. And their main job is to get that ship is going up and down and rolling while they're limited on the amount of water that they have and getting it across the bar in all weather conditions. And mostly in the wintertime, their job's very difficult. We don't have those same difficulties, but we have a route that takes 6 hours to go up and down the river, 6 to 7 hours, like I had mentioned to Ruby, and night, fog, people using the river we have to share with. Those are the main difference.
Great. Thanks so much, Captain Olson. We so appreciate you being here with us today. So Ruby, I've got a question for you. When your boat, the Liberty, finally makes it to Astoria and is relaunched back at sea, how long do you think it's going to take to get to Japan?
Well, I'm just going to take a wild guess here, and based off what our other boat, Gal, is doing and how it's almost getting pretty close, even though it's only been out for about 6 months. But I'm going to guess it's going to take 9 months to a year to get to Japan.
Great. Well, we'll have to keep checking the CRMM Miniboat Facebook page to get those updates. I'm sure Nate will continue to share the progress with us, and you can actually go on there and look at the GPS coordinates yourself. So Caitlin, we've got a question here for you. What was your role on the Miniboat team, and why did you choose that role? You might need to unmute yourself. Maybe we still can't hear you.
Well, I can tell you, she worked on the keel.
And Nate, can you remind us what the keel team does?
Sure. So the keel team is engineering the keel to make sure that when the boat flips upside down, it's weighted to right itself back up. And so she worked really, really hard. Warrenton has such a small school that each person was on 2 separate teams. One team that was writing and one team that was being messy, getting their hands dirty.
Wonderful. So along that lines, when those kids kind of get into the weeds and really get messy, when you take that boat over to Japan, Nate, how do the Japanese students get involved and make their mark on these mini boats?
Absolutely. So the really cool thing is every single boat, no matter if it's launched from the United States or Japan, has artwork from those students. So the sail, the Japanese students decorate the front of the sail that's being launched from Japan, and the Americans decorate the back of the sail. The boat being launched from the United States, the Japanese decorate the back, and the Americans decorate the front. Also, the Japanese students put in special cargo in the boat. So when it arrives here, they will be gifts for our students. Really cool stuff.
Very, very cool. So you showed us a really neat video with some Japanese students doing some dancing and singing us some songs. Do you think you could share with us what they were saying to us?
Yeah, so the first song that you heard was all about the ocean and the magic of the ocean and how it makes you feel good and how it's the smell. It was the school Okuki is actually right on the ocean, sort of like Warrenton is, except for the Okuki kids can actually see the water from their classroom. So it's a celebration of water in the ocean and fishing, because just like here, a lot of those students' parents are fishermen in Japan.
Great. That is just such a great connection back to the river and the water. And it sounds like we may have Mr. Boken back with us. Mr. Boken, are you ready to give us a report on our mini boat?
Yes, I am. So what you're looking at right there are 2 of the finest deputies, senior deputies of the Clatsop County Sheriff's Department. They stayed offshore while I hiked through the water and through the reeds and through the mud out to get the SV Liberty. So they're bringing her back to us so that we can relaunch her. Thank you. very much, Deputy Humphreys and team. There we go. So we've got her aboard. Looks like it's going to be another beautiful day out here on the Columbia River in the Pacific Northwest. So y'all should head out and try to find yourself a mini boat today.
Okay. Do you want to reposition before we toss the line?
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Boken. We are excited to continue to follow along with the journey of that mini boat. It has taken a journey. Let's go actually try to get back to Caitlin here. So Caitlin, get ready to unmute yourself. So what has been the most memorable part of being part of this program for you?
I hope I am unmuted. Yes, can you hear me? Okay. My favorite, most memorable part about the whole journey was probably when I was able to break the champagne, it was apple cider, again, over the mini boat. That was probably my favorite part.
Great. What a cool project and process that you get to go through with your fellow students. So John, actually a question for you. So what was the most challenging thing for you going from a large electrical system that you help make sure that the power stays on and the electrical configuration of our system? What was the most challenging thing for you going in to power lights on a mini boat?
Probably the most challenging thing. I mean, overall, the systems are the same. I mean, like the power systems kind of made up of the same components. Probably the biggest thing was figuring out how to create a system that would be suitable for a boat, the marine environment, because it can be a lot harsher than where our bulk electric system is built. So that was probably the most challenging thing.
Thanks so much. Yeah, we do have coastal service territory, but it's very different when you're on land than floating in the ocean. So we thank you so much for helping us. And it sounds like the boat's going to be doing just great. The lights are still working. So one more question here for Ruby. I'm hoping you can tell us what team you were on in this process, and why did you choose the role that you were on in the mini boat program?
Well, so this is a little bit of a story. It started out with us all having the sort of basic mini boat groups, and I chose to be part of the whole department, and we were supposed to paint the bottom side of the buoy, and I wanted to do that because I like drawing and getting to do art. And then when Nate finally got the drifter in, it turned out that basically everyone was going to be designing sails. So,
well, it sounds like you were able to navigate that challenge and find a role for yourself. And that's one of the things that's just so incredible about this program is whatever your interests are, there really is a space for each of our students to get involved and to participate as a team. And on that note, we have so many fans and we have, hopefully inspired some of you to be excited about this program. So Nate, final question back to you. We got a few people asking us, how can people support the program?
Great. Well, there's a couple of ways that you can support the program. Of course, this program is not free to run. So if you really love what you're seeing and what these kids are doing, making a donation to the Columbia River Maritime Museum and specifying it goes to the mini boat program will help ensure this program can be around for years and years and can inspire generations of students. And number two, you can just help by being a fan and a supporter. And if you're part of an organization that has a boat, or you have scientists who want to be mentors for our students, just send us an email, because we're always wanting to bring communities together. That's sort of the big part about the mini boat program. It really binds people together, even across the ocean.
Thank you so much, Nate. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for today. But I'd like to thank our guests once again. Nate, it was such a pleasure working with you and your students this year. Your enthusiasm and passion for this program and educating our kids is just simply a joy to watch. I'm sure everybody agrees with me on that one. I know you've inspired so many kids out there, and I'm sure several of them may be petitioning their teachers to be part of the mini boat program for next year. Thank you to Captain Olson for the insider look at your life on the river and all of the safe journeys that you've been able to help pilot in the river. And John from Pacific Power for helping that mini boat shine. And thanks again to Mr. Boken for all the hard work he's done in the last 3 weeks, helping keep that mini boat on track to make it to Astoria. And of course, we always love hearing from our students. So thank you so much, Ruby and Caitlin, for joining us today and sharing your experiences. We also want to thank all of you for tuning in and being part of this live stream series. I know we've all been a little stir crazy these days, so it was such a fun journey to follow these mini boats. And remember, you can continue to do that at the Mini Boat Facebook page at CRMM Mini Boat Program. This is Elisa from Pacific Power signing off for the last time, wishing you and your family a safe and healthy summer. Thanks so much.